Today's episode of the Wildcard Podcast is brought to you by Summer Camp.
No.
Summer Camp, a great place for the whole family.
Like Camp Blood.
Exactly.
No
Spend
Camp
some
Blood.
long nights at Camp Blood.
Where you can go swimming in our beautiful
Crystal
lake.
clear
Or
water.
Go
take a
swimming, I'll
long
spare
canoe
you.
ride with that special someone.
No canoes?
There's a fine archery range. And targets
Have
for
you seen
hatchet
Jared?
throwing. You can go for long
Jared?
walks in the woods with
Don't
a
go
group
for
or
walks in the
split off
woods.
by yourself.
Don't ever split up in the woods. Haven't you seen these movies? Jared? Jeff? Guys? I welcome Death's sweet embrace. Death? Jared? Jeff? Jason? Okay, I guess this is my life now. Alone. Death!
Welcome to the Wildcard Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Eaton, and my co-pilots on this journey to wherever are my good friends, Jeff Curtis,
Hello.
and the man who never leaves home without a machete and a hockey mask, just in case, Ron Blair.
That's right, he's back! He's the man behind the mask!
I've always wondered why we carry this with you, but
No,
just
you
in
know.
just in case.
Just in case.
All right. So, as we get started here on the Wildcard Podcast, it is Ron Blair's job to cough into the mic and then to tell you what this podcast is all about.
The Wildcard Podcast is about bringing quality education and entertainment to the tri-state areas, including Farley, Granger, Peckinpah, and Cassavetes counties. The Wildcard Podcast is brought to you by a grant underwritten by the Falcor Corporation, and with funding by you, our public broadcasting audience. The Wildcard Broadcasting Channel powers itself off of 3 towers in Cthulhu, Dagoff, and Pazuzu counties, submitting a 15,000 megahertz signal into your homes. The Wildcard Podcast now concludes its broadcasting day. Thank you for being a Wildcard listener. That's nostalgia, isn't
Wow,
it?
that
is nostalgic.
That is something right there. It is certainly something. Okay.
That was one of my favorite things when the TV would go off at night.
Yeah.
Do you remember at
no,
all?
I remember it. I always
I
hated
know
the
you
TV
remember
going off
because
at
it
night.
was
I remember
2 o'clock
it.
in the morning. It's
Some
like,
Why does it
channels.
have to go off?
Some channels would do it,
And
but
then it stopped
most
going
channels
off.
would not when I was a kid, but some channels would.
Yeah. Now, when Jeff and I were
Yeah.
young, 2 a.m., that was it. You
That's
get
the
this
time.
the end of the broadcasting
Yep.
day. And I'm so nostalgic over that.
Yeah. So, Wildcards, Cthulhu County. That's about the
Cthulhu
only,
County.
That's about the
The
only
tri-state area.
Tri-state area.
Which is the
including
other
Farley.
state.
Right. Oh, and Jeff, did you pick up on the Western? The Western, Farley Granger
Yeah.
is a Western star. Sam Peckinpah, John
Okay.
Cassavetes.
I did not get any of those references.
Yeah, they were old,
Not a big
either
Western
Western
fan.
or action movie star. John Cassavetes was a badass. Sam Peckinpah was a Western director, I think.
Yep.
Badass kind of movies.
But of all the badasses, none of them measure up to Roy Harley.
Roy Harley. Roy mother freaking Harley.
Roy Harley never apologized.
The
Roy Harley
patron
never
saint of the
apologizes.
podcast.
I love Roy
Roy
Harley so much.
All right, speaking of things from the past, very appropriate.
Yes.
Because our favorite question today was actually something I was going to interject with on last week's podcast.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
going to be my let me stop you right there, but our opening took 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Before we even got to the
Yeah,
report.
I was
So
like,
I'm
by
you
the
know
end-
what? I think I'll save this.
By the time I got to the end of the report, I was like, I could seriously go on for another hour and a
Yeah,
half.
you could've.
And I didn't hardly get anything that I
when
wanted
the
out.
opening took a lot longer than I expected.
We only used half of the
Half of
quotes
Clint
from
stuff,
your friend
yeah.
Clint.
Yeah.
So the question I have for you today is, what would be your favorite alternate time period for you to live in?
Oh, I
If
think
you
about this
did-
all the time, actually.
Yeah, if you didn't live now, because the question actually came from an episode a while back. It was the
Yeah.
last Masterfully Debate episode where Jeff brought the what if
Yeah.
questions when you were talking about Vikings, and it just seemed like you two would fit that, and I would not.
I don't know that I want to be in
Well,
a Viking time.
I'm not saying you have to pick that.
We
one. I'm
would
just saying
fit.
That's where this question
Our
came
features
from.
would fit.
That's where
into
this
that
question
time period.
came from.
I'd be a lot thinner, probably.
Well, you know, people romanticize the Middle Ages or Dickensian eras.
Yes.
These are the worst eras to live in.
God.
All these that are romanticized. I don't want to live in the Middle Ages. You get murdered quickly.
Yeah.
And in Dickensian times, if you weren't murdered, you'd become a gin-swilling alcoholic, or you'd be
Because-
poverty-stricken, tuberculosis, Black Plague
We
everywhere.
did the nostalgia. eyes the past so that we only remember the things that
glasses.
Right.
that are we think are cool, and we forget all the misery of
Right.
of
How
life.
awful
lack
it
of
was
technology
back then.
and-
Yeah.
Imagine if you lived then but knew what modern technology had. Like you're like,
Oh,
That'd be
how
worse.
bad would that suck?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's one thing to not
Worse.
to be ignorant of all the innovations that are coming in the future. It's another thing to be like, man, I sure do miss
Yeah.
indoor plumbing.
Yeah. That would probably be
I
my
would really
biggest
miss
thing.
indoor plumbing.
I'm not going to shit in that hole. Are you kidding me?
But where do you think you would fit personality-wise?
It'd have
Because
to be
Ron,
in the
I could
20th
see
century.
you. I could see you living in the West.
In the Old West?
I think Ron could fit the Old West.
I could probably fit the Old West as a merchant.
Yeah, you think
Or a whorehouse guy.
Okay.
That would probably
Okay.
be my, owning a bar
Salacious,
or
yeah.
a saloon, a whorehouse. That would be my thing.
can
I'd be
see
a
that.
pimp back in the Old
Yeah.
West. Old West pimp. That's the new movie I'm going to
Where
write.
do you see Jeff living?
Where do I see Jeff living?
I could see him living in Victorian England.
Oh, I could see that.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I was thinking more of Renaissance Europe.
Okay, yeah, I would go.
yeah,
Europe
but
in
there's
general.
still so much murder going
There
on back
is.
then.
Maybe he's the murderer.
Oh, if you're the murderer,
No
then
one
you
would
don't have to
suspect
worry
it.
about getting
No one
murdered
would suspect it.
until they catch you. And do you know how they
I could
punish? How
definitely
harshly
see,
they punish
I
people
could
back
see
then?
Jeff in like Greece, ancient.
That I
Greece.
could see.
Like having those debates about philosophy,
Yeah.
Epicureanism versus
Socrates.
Writing
yeah, yeah.
music back then
In
that's
his- in his toga,
revolutionary.
in his toga.
'Cause right, in his toga. You'd like bang 6 or 7 chords off on a rock and a.
They had musical instruments back then.
No.
Well, no, I don't
invented
believe
them,
that.
that's why they're there.
You invented them. If you hadn't invented them, they wouldn't have had them. That's the continuum that we live in
Yeah.
right now because of Jared's question.
There you go.
I would have liked to have lived in the 70s.
Okay.
I did.
I mean, yeah, Jeff lived through that.
You
Well,
were,
that's it.
you
That's
were
me
alive
with
in the
the 80s.
70s.
I was alive in 73.
That's me
I
with
mean,
the 80s. I was born in the late 80s, but like when I watch like Ready Player One or Stranger Things, I'm like, that's
Right.
not my childhood.
No, if you'd been born in the mid 60s
If
or
I'd been-
so, then
yeah.
in the
If
80s
I'd
you'd
been
been
born
like a teen.
10 years earlier.
Right. I feel like there was so much independent film and stuff like that going
is
on in
that
the late
why?
60s and 70s that if I were 18, 19 in 1968 or somewhere around there, then I would have wanted to have jumped on that indie film bandwagon, probably in the horror genre with Romero or Carpenter or something like that, or go out to USC
Romero
where
might make
Carpenter went.
an appearance in the report today.
Oh
I threw
my!
that in just for you.
My!
I always wanted to. I always thought I would have been nice to have been older in the 60s, like 68 to 73 music wise, you know.
Oh yeah, that's when it happened. That's when it all changed.
Just at the time of the Beatles and all that stuff. That would have been,
Yeah.
that would have been cool. But generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with the time I'm living in.
Yeah, I'm okay. I grew up in the 80s. There's not much to complain about.
Literally cannot imagine myself in any other time period.
Yeah.
I don't think I would fit anywhere else.
I just feel that
I think you would have to live in a time period where you had to wear a pencil mustache.
I would have loved that.
1920s.
This podcast is being recorded with me and my pencil mustache for the last time.
The handsome pencil mustache and the very attractive pencil mustache.
All right. So
With that, he moves on.
with that,
moving
let's
away
move
from
on.
the facial hair, it is my job to bring a report today, and we know that I like to do my reports. So I'm going
Oh,
to
yeah.
retrieve my binder, and I'm going to be honest. I've got
Your
several.
manual.
I have several. My D&D. I'm hiding
You're right.
my spine. So I have several questions that lead into the episode.
This is a series of
It's not
questions,
just
not
the,
just a question.
It's not just the one question. Okay.
This is a very special episode today.
Aren't they all special?
Is it?
There's a special lesson at the end of this one.
How do you know that? Do you know what it is?
I've seen Different Strokes. I saw when Arnold and Dudley went to the bike shop.
What you talking about, Ron?
Owned by yeah, see, Gordon owned it, and he was
Before my
like,
time, before my
Arnold
time.
was like, "This is freaky. I'm getting out of here." And Dudley was like, "Well, I'll stick around. He's giving me some money." Arnold comes in, Dudley without a shirt. There's your special episode right
Let me
there.
stop you right there.
Okay.
Jared?
Oh,
Question for you two
Good
gentlemen.
thinking.
Question for you two gentlemen. Do you believe in the soul?
no.
I don't know. I
It goes back to no, but who am I
Yeah.
to say
Well,
there's not?
here's the thing. I've spent a large part of my life pretty religious. And I would like there to be a soul. I don't know that there's not.
Right.
But
Yeah.
right.
Science has nothing on this.
Yeah.
But I stopped going to church because I could no longer pretend to believe what I used to believe.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
I would be lying to say if I said, yeah, I believe there's a soul. I hope there's a soul.
Right.
I don't know that there's a soul.
Yeah, I don't think there is, but
It's
I
an
don't
interesting
know.
question.
I can't know.
So kind of going with that, this idea that we have a soul inside of us, that our physical body is one thing, but our spirit and our mind are somehow something separate. Do you believe that some people are born good and some people are born bad?
Yes, I will believe in that. Somewhat. I believe environmental factors have a great deal to do with it as well. But I do think that there's something in the DNA makeup that there's the switch.
Yeah.
And sometimes the switch gets flipped.
I don't think anyone is born specifically good. There are people who are, because inside each one of us, we all have the capacity to do good and evil, and most of us live a life of choosing which of those, whether we're trying to be more altruistic or selfish and balancing. And there's people, the good people are the people who are aware of those selfish tendencies inside of themselves and work hard to keep those in check while they're doing good work. But that takes work. It's not something that just happens. It's a choice.
The right choice is never the easy one.
It's a daily choice.
That's the truth.
I do believe that there are people who are born with psychotic and sociopathic DNA.
That's the switch I'm talking about.
And for those people, there are psychopaths who have no interest in killing people. They just have an interest in using other people to help them. Manipulation. So there are varying degrees of that, but I believe that some of that it can't be. It just is.
It's hard. It'd be hard to argue with that because you see so many kids who. It seemed like there's nothing the parents did wrong.
Right.
It's just that's where they grew up and their fascination and the way their brain was wired. So I don't really want to stick on that for very long because that's not fun to talk about.
Yeah, that's a downer.
So instead of talking about the bad souls, I want to talk about who are the best souls you know. What people do you know that are just the good people?
Emily Kohler.
Yeah,
Emily Kohler's the best of them.
Yeah, she is. Yeah. She is good people.
Yeah, she's a good folk. And that's it. Good night,
that's
everybody. That's the only person we know that's actually good.
I would say Moira's really good.
Moira's really good.
I would say
Aaron's really
Sadiq.
good.
No, not Aaron.
Sadiq
is great.
Aaron is like me. He's more Loki-ish.
Oh, okay.
Where whatever misbehaviors he has isn't evil.
So likable.
It's not
mischievous.
We're not. We don't hurt anybody. We just
on purpose.
On purpose. Right. We're just mischievous. Well, all those people didn't matter because we got what we wanted.
There you go.
Right?
Proving my point.
Doesn't have to be someone who listens to the podcast.
No.
It can just be anyone that you've known.
Well, only our podcast listeners are good people.
That's it. You nailed it.
I've known a lot of people who are really nice and good and decent people because those are the people I like to hang out with.
Yeah. Wow.
There's a friend of mine.
When are they coming over?
Well, they live all over the place because I've got a friend who's a minister with the UCC, Arlene Nearing, and she spent her life working for poor, and she's serving her church and working on protecting immigrants from being deported and working on just human rights.
Yeah.
But she's not the only one of my friends. I've got a lot of friends who do that. So I tend to hang out with those kinds of people because the other kind of people make me feel bad.
No, I get that.
So for me as a teacher,
I
get kind of two interesting aspects of this. I get a large number of students that go to my room every year, and there are some that are just, they have the kindest hearts.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're the kids, like, when they graduate, I'm like, man, I'm so sad that I don't get to see them every day anymore. Like, because they're so good. And then, like, I get to see some teachers, like, especially special education teachers.
Yeah.
Who have patience and just golden souls and
I think there are a lot of young people that you go, well, that's just a good person, and they are. They're really good people. I think the idealism of being a young person can sometimes tend towards good behavior. That's exactly it. The world hadn't kicked your teeth in yet, so you do have this optimistic outlook, and you want good for everybody, and then life gets a hold of you.
I think one thing is changing. I think there are a lot of kids now who run into that younger and younger and younger and say, I'm going to do something about it.
Well, I love that young generations now are going, what's been going on for so long is wrong, and we have to change it.
Yeah.
We're the ones who have to.
I think that's different than even than when I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say that the internet gives the younger generation the ability to feel like they can change that because they can
Yeah,
actually
I agree.
speak out. Because when I was young, I wanted to change the world too. I just didn't have the foggiest idea how I would do that.
You'd be like, how do we stop the bombings in Beirut? Well, what are you going to do? And that was the answer. And the kids nowadays, they go, that's not an acceptable answer. Mm-hmm. This is the way the world is not an acceptable answer. Yeah. Life's not fair is not an acceptable answer. How can we make these acceptable answers? How can we make it so that these are not true statements any longer?
So today we're going to talk about two people who are inspirations.
I'm one. Am I one?
It's Ron.
It's about me
Ron
today.
It's Ron and Jeff.
Me and Jeff. It's about me and Jeff
Well, you guys
today.
count as only one person.
Oh, okay.
But I want to talk about two people,
That's not
especially from when I
fair.
was young,
Okay.
who just gave me that inspiration that you can do anything. So just good people.
Yeah.
That's what I want to talk about today.
All right, good.
All right.
Good.
So here's kind of where this came from.
Uplifting.
In the 39 Steps, my
Good.
character Richard Hanna gives an impromptu speech,
Hanna.
and he uses it to talk about how we need to be better people to each other.
An impromptu 3.5-page speech.
Exactly. It's
My God,
absurd.
yes.
It's absurd.
It's a ridiculous speech.
so
I get to
stupid.
sleep through most of it, so I'm good.
So in that vein,
Working on drooling.
I want to talk today about some nice people.
All right, good.
So my next question is, do you like art?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of art do you guys enjoy?
I don't know art, but I know what I like.
And I asked, what do you like? I
Oh,
just asked
shit.
that.
Is it a broad scope of
What
art?
do you like?
Oh, I like art.
Great.
I like music.
Jeff Hoppin.
I like
No, physical, visual art.
Visual art. Okay, there we go.
I like modern art. I like abstract modern art where the art isn't painting you a picture; it's painting you an emotion.
You know what I like is Nighthawks. The one with James Dean and Marilyn Monroe. They're all at the diner late at night, like in Los Angeles. I
seen
love
that one,
that. I like pop art.
Yeah.
Not so much Andy Warhol, although I do appreciate some of his stuff.
And
Not
my
Jackson
my
Pollock,
taste in
'cause
art
that's
is
a
the exact
rip-off.
opposite of you two.
Is it more classic?
Landscapes. I want landscapes. That's all I want.
Okay.
I want.
Well, I do. I love Monet.
I want a
and I
picture
love
that
Van
makes me
Gogh.
think of a place and like, oh, it's beautiful.
Well,
Because abstract, I can appreciate the artistry and what it's trying to evoke, but I just don't tend to get emotional at paintings unless it's a physical place.
I like Salvador Dali too. I dig
love
Dali a lot.
Dali's great. I love Salvador Dali.
I like stuff that can fuck with my brain.
I like
a little
Escher.
bit. Oh,
Escher,
MC Escher.
MC
Yeah,
Escher.
yeah, with the impossible
That's impossible.
staircase
Yeah, I like
and
those.
stuff like that.
That I
Yes.
like as well.
Yeah, that's neat stuff.
So today we're talking about an artist who does my kind of art.
Okay, it does
Landscapes.
landscapes.
You know what we're talking about?
Bob Ross.
It's Bob
We're
Ross.
doing Bob Ross today.
We're talking
Holy
about
cow.
This episode's for you, Jake.
How did we not know that it was leading into Bob Ross? Well, that was a swerve.
And told you this is a
I'm caught off
two-parter. So Bob
It's
Ross,
about me and
Bob
Bob
Ross
Ross.
isn't the only person we're talking about. So Robert Norman Ross, born October 29th, 1942,
Served his country.
passed away July 4th, 1995, was an American painter, art instructor, and television host. He was the creator and host of The Joy of Painting, an instructional television program that aired on PBS from 1983 to 1994, and also aired in United States, Canada, Latin America, and Europe.
If you
11-year
have
run.
nothing else to watch, you can pop on Bob Ross
It is on
and just
Netflix.
let it soothe you.
And
Yeah,
I
oh, yeah.
wa- and
There's
I watch
two.
it. I
There's
watch it.
two Bob
I
Ross
have
shows
both
on
of them.
Netflix. Yeah.
I used to watch Bob Ross every day for relaxing after
It was
work.
if I'm flipping through the channels,
If I have nothing else to watch,
because
I
there's
just-
nothing I want, and I come across Bob Ross, the channel clicking stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
yeah,
a fine
it's
place
okay.
to settle.
I love watching
My
Bob Ross.
brother-in-law and I, before I was married to my wife, he and I would take a ride and we would smoke some things. And then we would go back to his house.
Brisket.
And flip it was that
Smoke some
brisket. We'd
brisket.
smoke some brisket out there. And we would come home to his house. It was like in the middle of the day. If we had a day off or if it was a time where we weren't employed, we would just go there and pop it on. And of course, PBS during the day, it was Bob Ross.
Absolutely.
And that's where it ended. And we would just sink into oblivion and listen to
contented oblivion.
Yeah, and watch Bob Ross do his magic. It was great.
Yeah, but it's not just his painting; it's his soothing.
That's
way he's
what it
talking
is.
while
He's
he's
called. I
painting.
don't know
Yeah.
if you guys know this. He's called the father of ASMR.
What is
What does that
ASMR?
mean?
You know, it's his.
No.
Caleb knows what it is. You don't know what it is? Wow. Okay.
Well,
All
he
right.
doesn't listen.
It's ASMR is this kind of internet fascination with people who talk in very quiet, whispering voices, and it's very soothing.
ASMR.
I don't think anyone heard you on our podcast.
But it's perhaps not. I just whispered into the microphone very softly. But people will listen to those as for soothing, and some people that's their thing they do on the internet.
Yeah.
Is they talk quietly, and people get these very special headphones, so it sounds like they're talking into a specific ear. And people say his voice is the beginning of that, even though it was a decade before ASMR was created.
Wow, yeah.
So
How
Bob
cool
Ross
is
was
that?
born in Daytona, Florida,
Yeah.
the child of a carpenter and a waitress who separated, married other people, separated from those new partners, and then got married to each other again, all before their son had hit his teens.
Well, what are you going to do? It was like the, 50s or so. Oh, that didn't happen in the 50s.
He was born in 42.
Wow.
So it would have been.
So let's try divorce.
Late 40s.
Yeah, that didn't
late
happen
40s,
often
early
back
50s.
then, did it? Oh, wow.
He is Floridian, though, so.
Yeah, they were a little more free and open-minded,
As a child, Ross entertained himself by caring for injured animals, much to the chagrin of his parents.
I can see that.
Soon became used to became used to coming home to find an injured alligator in the bathtub or an armadillo running around Ross's room. One of these animals, a squirrel named Peapod, was featured in several episodes of the show. And if you watch the show, he'll have an animal there with him sometimes, or he'll have videos. While he's painting something, you'll see videos of him with animals all the time.
Squirrels were his big thing. He loved squirrels. He had them around his house.
He would nurse them around his house, and his wife would do it all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, what a guy, huh?
So Bob Ross dropped out of high school in the 9th grade to work as a carpenter with his father, Jack Ross. And while he was doing this, he lost part of his left index finger. But this never affected the way he painted. In fact,
I never noticed.
He would hide it under the palette. It was always in his left hand. It was always in his left hand.
That's like Gary Berghoff, who played Radar O'Reilly in MASH. He had a baby hand. It was a withered hand.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And for all those years, like 11 years, I think, 11 or 12 years MASH was on?
Yeah, but he wasn't on the whole time. He left halfway through.
Right, but you'd never see him. You'd never see his hand because he was always obscuring it.
Huh. I
Yeah,
that.
If you watch new episodes, you can now watch Radar and see that.
That would explain why he probably didn't do a whole lot after he left MASH.
Just after MASH. Sorry, Gary.
In 1961, the then 18-year-old Bob Ross enlisted in the United States Air Force and was put into service as a medical records technician. He eventually rose to the rank of Master Sergeant and served as the first sergeant of the U.S. Air Force Clinic in Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska.
Good on you, Bob.
Where he first saw the snow and mountains that later became recurring themes in his artwork.
Ah, inspired.
Yep, because he'd been in Florida.
Right.
Having held military positions that required him to be, in his own words, tough and mean, the guy who makes you scrub the latrine, the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who screams at you for being late to work. In stark contrast to the quiet, reserved nature Ross displayed on his show. In the Air Force, he developed a reputation as a bit of a ball buster, earning the nickname
I can't either.
Bust 'em Up Bobby.
Wow.
Ross decided that if he ever left the military, he would never yell or raise his voice again.
Well, talk about having a job that's counterintuitive to who you are.
Yeah. Jeez.
Well, I know. I can't even imagine.
During his 20-year tenure with the U.S. Air Force, Ross developed a taste for painting after attending an art class at the Anchorage USO Club.
I had heard this. It's not something he grew up doing or anything.
No. He found himself frequently at
as
odds.
an adult human being.
He would have been, in his mid-20s, late 20s.
Well, late 20s, okay.
He found himself frequently at odds with many of his painting instructors who were more interested in abstract painting. In Ross's own words, they'd tell you what makes a tree, but they wouldn't tell you how to paint a tree. Ross was working as a part-time bartender when he discovered a TV show called The Magic of Oil Painting, hosted by German painter Bill Alexander. Alexander touted a 16th century style of painting called alla prima, Italian for first attempt, that are known as wet on wet because it literally involves applying many layers of wet paint to a single canvas to create an image.
Wet on wet is actually my favorite adult website.
I had to pause. I was going to pause.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
There was no way we're getting through that.
No, wet on wet.
This alla prima style allowed Ross to finish, or anyone, to finish a painting in a little under 30 minutes.
Yeah.
During a typical episode of The Magic of Oil Painting, Alexander would create a single painting, invariably a landscape of some sort, over the course of half an hour while slowly walking the viewers at home through the entire process. Ross would later use an almost identical format for his show.
But have you ever looked at a Bob Ross painting and went, well, I could do that. I'll just do what he does.
Never once.
Sir.
But when I'm watching
I can't do that.
But the thing is, when you're watching it, you're like, oh, he's just doing this. He's just doing this.
There's just a line there.
Yeah. He's just streaking the brush across. He's got his knife and he's just pulling it across. And then you sneeze and there's a mountain there.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, well, that's not a tree. That's an arrow pointing upwards. Yeah. And then he's like, and then we just do a couple brush strokes there. And you go, what the fuck? It's a tree. Yeah. All of a sudden.
Ross studied and became quite good at alla prima through Alexander's show and began selling Alaskan landscape paintings on the inside of novelty gold pans.
Smart.
Before long, Ross became fairly famous with locals for his talents and would often give demonstrations to children and the elderly.
Oh, that guy.
When Ross began making more money from selling the gold pans than his military job, he retired from the Air Force in 1981 after 20 years of service.
Wow. So he had to have been like 38 by this time. 38, 40.
Yeah,
somewhere
38.
in there.
Yeah, right, because he was, he's listed when he was 18.
Yeah.
After leaving the Air Force, Ross returned to Florida in the early 1980s, intent on seeking out Bill Alexander to learn the finer points of wet-on-wet painting. Alexander, who was an art teacher in his spare time, happily taught Ross everything he knew about painting. After a few months of lessons, Ross was offered a job with the Alexander Magic Art Supplies Company as a traveling tutor.
Well,
Hot damn.
While working for the
What a great
company,
path.
Ross's hypnotic voice and gentle prodding style that emphasized that there were no mistakes,
Just
happy accidents,
Yes.
caught the attention of a lady named Annette Kowalski, who later admitted that she was simply mesmerized by Ross's personality. After a few lessons with Ross, Kowalski became convinced that if she could somehow package the experience of painting with him, she and Ross could make a fortune.
And they did.
Yep. Before the show launched, Ross had little success promoting his painting technique. His trademark permed hairstyle
Yep.
came about as a cost-cutting measure.
Oh,
His
yes. I
regular
read this.
crew-cut hairstyles became too expensive because he had the Air Force haircut
Yeah,
for so
right.
long. Ross grew increasingly uncomfortable with the style in his later years, but kept it throughout the career.
Well, that was his trademark
Yeah,
after
absolutely.
a while. That and the beard, yeah.
Exactly how Ross went from perming his hair to save $5 to being on TV isn't clear. And there are two conflicting stories about how Ross came to the attention of PBS. The version recounted in a PBS biopic of his life. Biopic, what do you think?
Biopic? Biopic.
I say biopic.
Biopic?
Biopic is where I
That
go,
sounds
but
like
I've
a
heard both.
treatment that I would have at the
I've heard it both
optometrist,
ways.
though.
I've heard it both ways.
I've heard it both ways. Sure. Agree to disagree.
The PBS
Right.
biopic
Biopic.
of his life stated that Ross filmed a commercial for the network with his former mentor, Bill Alexander, promoting his art classes that just so happened to catch the eye of the right executive.
Oh, yeah. It's luck.
Another version of the story states that Kowalski filmed one of Ross's 30-minute lessons and sent it to the network, who liked it enough to greenlight a pilot, and it's possible that both those things are true.
Yeah, yeah.
When the time came to film the first episode of The Joy of Painting, Ross made the conscious decision to speak as though he were talking to a singular viewer, giving the illusion that he was giving a private lesson. The show had its first run from January 11th, 1983 to May 17th, 1994, but reruns still continue
11
to
years,
appear
yeah.
in many broadcast areas and countries, including the PBS-oriented network Create. During each half-hour segment, Ross would instruct viewers in oil painting during a quick study technique from the imagination that used a limited palette of paints and broke down the process into simple steps. You always felt like, I think if he was here, like, I could do it.
That's it. If he were over your shoulder, telling you how to do it, showing you how to do it,
He,
you'd
at the
figure it
beginning of
out.
every episode, he would tell you exactly what paints you needed.
Yeah.
And he would tell you, here's what I did to the canvas, because the canvas started out wet.
Right.
It was never
Right.
just like a dry canvas. The idea of the wet on wet is the canvas is wet, and you're just adding things on top of it to
Right.
create that illusion. Ross was never actually paid for appearing in the show.
Really?
And he never sold a single painting featured on it.
I wasn't aware of that. No,
The show was
that's
instead
nuts.
used as a vehicle to promote Ross's teaching business, interest in which exploded after the show first aired.
Well, I
help-
just thought he did that. That was his
He
job.
got
I
paid
thought.
nothing for the joy of painting.
They never
Wow.
paid him for
Nope.
it?
I knew PBS didn't pay much,
Yeah.
but I thought they'd pay
They
something.
aired his show and didn't pay him
for
anything?
11 years.
With help from Annette Kowalski, Ross built a $15 million business. Bob Ross Incorporated, selling his line of art supplies, how-to books, and marketed painting classes taught by instructors trained in the Bob Ross method.
Annette,
So
there
that's
must be-
where his money came from.
Annette, there must be,
Wow.
God, $15
So
here.
basically,
That's 15, man.
That's
That's
15,
15, man.
15, man. So basically, it was an 11-year television commercial.
Exactly. Look what I can do, and if you buy this, you can do it
Yeah,
too.
you can do it too. Yeah, it worked for Harry Blackstone. I bought that magic
But I mean,
bullshit
if
that
you
nobody
think
could
about
ever
it, like
do.
that really seems like Annette's idea more than his. Because I feel like
Yeah.
he would just enjoy coming in and talking to people.
That'd be the thing. She's the one. He was less interested in the money, I'm sure, and she
Everyone needs money.
was the one that was like, this is a product. Bob Ross is a product.
Absolutely, he is a product.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, he was just such a human. Like he
Yeah,
would
and it
be
came
on an
across.
episode, not only showing you those videos of the animals, he would read fan mail and talk to viewers who
Yeah.
asked specific questions. Like he would, it was almost like a dialogue, except it wasn't. But that's how he presented it.
His son does it now, doesn't he? A
So
TV
he
show or
he
something
was
like that?
on the Bob Ross show several times.
That's
think.
what I was thinking.
I don't know if he has his own show now, but he was on Joy Painting
Yeah.
30 something times, I think.
Yeah.
I can't imagine this guy as a yelling at people in the.
I know.
Yeah.
So different from the military aspect that you have to think about.
I met a guy
weird.
when I was in New York working with people who have developmental disabilities, and I was staff training at the time, and I went with this one group because I'd go out in the community with them, and I was going to this. I don't know. I don't remember what kind of volunteer site it was. I don't remember the work that they were doing. But one of the people that they would interact with at the site was this big, heavy-set guy who was really friendly and soft-spoken and stuff like that. And I was talking to him one day, and I found out that he used to be the commandant of a military prison in Germany where Eichmann was held.
Holy shit!
He was commandant of that place.
He ran the place. He was like
either
one of the top guys.
He's one of the top guys, or else he was one of the top soldiers there or officers there.
Yeah.
And it's like I couldn't place this guy in the military. And he said, "Oh yeah, there's sometimes when a cab driver will do something, and that part of me will come out."
Wow.
I'll be damned.
So Ross dedicated the first episode of the second season of Joy Painting to Bill Alexander, explaining that, "Years ago, Bill taught me this fantastic technique, and I feel as though he gave me a precious gift, and I'd like to share that gift with you, the viewer." As Ross's popularity grew, his relationship with Alexander became increasingly strained. "He betrayed me,"
that makes sense.
Alexander told the New York Times in 1991. "I invented wet on wet. I trained him, and he thinks he can do better."
Come on, Alexander.
Art historians have pointed out that the wet on wet or a la prima technique actually originated in Flanders, Belgium during the 15th century.
Right.
And was used by many painters, including Cézanne, Sargent, and Monet, among many others.
Yeah.
So,
sorry,
suck it out,
Alexander. You don't get to
He just
copyright
made it.
that.
This
Just
is
angry
Bob
that
Ross.
your student is more popular.
That's
and
what it was.
Financially stable.
Yeah.
than
Instead of being happy for Bob
Yeah.
Ross.
Ross was well known for the catchphrases he used while painting, such as, "Happy little trees."
Right.
Yep.
In most episodes of The Joy Painting, Ross would note that one of his favorite parts of painting was cleaning the brush. Specifically, he was fond of his method of drying off a brush that he had dipped in odorless thinner by striking it against the thinner can.
The slap technique.
Then striking a box for early seasons and a trash can for later seasons. Occasionally, he would strike the brush hard on the trash can and say he hit the bucket. He would smile and often laugh aloud as he said, "to beat the devil out of it." He says that in every episode.
To beat the
devil
devil
out of it. When
I imagine Ned Flanders being a Bob Ross
fan.
Yeah.
When asked about his laid-back approach and his calm, contented demeanor, he commented, "I got a letter from somebody here a while back, and they said, 'Bob, everything in your world seems to be happy.' That's for sure. That's why I paint. It's because I can create the kind of world that I want, and I can make this world as happy as I want it. Shoot, if you want bad stuff, watch the news."
Well, if he never sold any of the paintings he did on the program, what did he do with them?
He donated most of them.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
there's
yeah.
one that was donated. He honestly, it was never even publicly displayed. There was only one place in his entire run that he ever let display his paintings publicly.
Yeah.
He would donate them to PBS where they would auction them off.
Well, that's
and make
what I
money.
was thinking. It was the
Oh,
PBS
okay.
studio
Yeah.
or whatever down
But
there.
it was his choice. He donated them to
Yeah.
PBS.
So not only did they not pay him for his show, he gave them paintings to
Help raise
auction
money.
off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ross often
Wow.
filmed wildlife, squirrels in particular, usually in his garden, and he would often take in injured or abandoned squirrels and other animals. Ross was diagnosed with lymphoma in the spring of 1994, which eventually forced his retirement after The Joy of Painting's final episode aired on May 17th, 1994. He died at the age of 52 on July 4th, 1995.
52.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was.
And he was nearly 40 when he left the Air Force.
Yeah, he only got to enjoy it for like 12 years.
But think of how much people are still enjoying it.
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't
living
die.
forever.
It goes on, yeah.
Since his
Yeah.
death, Ross has been embedded in multiple instances of pop culture. Commenting for a 2017 news story about him, entertainment website Screen Rant would note that the artist continues to have one of the most remarkable second lives of any media
Oh,
figure
yeah. He's
of
more
the past
popular
several
now
decades.
than he ever was,
Yeah.
I think.
Fans make and sell Bob Ross as Lego figurines on Etsy.
Yeah.
HGTV made a Halloween costume. He is a Google Doodle and the subject of many BuzzFeed lists. More than 50 people dressed up as Bob Ross for a bar crawl in Chicago in 2015.
Wow.
He's been a Family Guy joke, or more recently, in My Little Pony. Even YouTube celebrities can't seem to get enough of him. In 2013, he faced off with Pablo Picasso in epic rap battles of history. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of that one. I haven't
funny.
seen that one.
And PBS's remixed video of his famous sayings is one of the most popular
Oh, I
PBS
love that one.
videos ever.
That's a soothing video anyway.
It's
Yeah.
auto-tuned, but it's still...
It's cool.
So
It's
why
cool
do you
as hell.
think he's still so popular?
Because he was.
I-
He makes you feel good. I don't remember how to paint. I was never a very good painter. I didn't
Yeah.
watch him because I was
Yeah.
wanted. I mean, I
enjoyed
enjoyed learning the
his painting, but I was
technique.
never going to paint.
Exactly. I mean, I love listening to it, and I imagine. Okay, well, how I enjoyed watching him do it and trying to imagine myself doing it. But I've never once tried to actually paint it. I didn't watch
Right,
him
no.
for the paintings.
No.
Some of them, which they were good paintings, but they weren't stuff that I'd want to buy anyway.
Right.
I loved watching Bob Ross paint and the way he talked. I just enjoyed it.
It was filmed in his basement, and it felt like you were just sitting there with him and he was talking.
Yeah,
exactly.
I can't believe that wasn't a studio or
what's
something
so
like that.
interesting about that style that he took, I read several articles about why he's still so popular. And one of them is he invented vlogging. Video blogs.
Oh, I guess he did, didn't he?
People do this now, 2000s, maybe even late 90s, with video blog where it's like they're talking to a listener.
Right.
Kind of like what we're doing, but with a video. Right. And he did it in the late 80s, where he was talking to people in his TV show. It wasn't just I'm doing a thing and you are consuming it. It's this is back and forth between us. And he almost invented that.
I think he's more popular now for the same reason that I said that everybody's eager for Christmas to come, is because people need Bob Ross right now. They need his kind of lesson and his stillness, his peace.
Yep.
Besides talking to his audience, Ross was interactive in a way that was very atypical of TV shows back then, but is standard today. He would share fan mail and fan art on air, dispense wisdom and advice unrelated to painting, and even answered questions and took suggestions from his viewers as to what his next video should be about, just like many YouTubers do today. It makes sense then that his episodes would resonate with modern, younger viewers who grew up watching similar interactive formats.
Yeah.
Ross was also very DIY. The Joy of Painting episodes, in case you didn't know, were filmed in his basement. Beyond that, his episodes are also very reminiscent of how-to videos, another staple of YouTube, but with a more motivating spin.
Yeah.
If you listen closely, you'll never hear Bob say, "I'm going to teach you this." Bob says, "Let's learn this together." That's a quote from Annette Kowalski. The content Ross made in the 1990s was created to be broadcast on television, but the more dominant aspects about his episodes seem like they were meant for an audience of the future, for people of the internet. And in many ways, we need Bob Ross more than ever. His positivity and lo-fi calmness is a soothing balm on our fast-scrolling, overwhelming, and oftentimes cruel digital world. So I grew up watching Bob Ross. That was a TV show that was on when I was young, when it was being aired live.
Yeah.
What TV program do you guys remember from your childhood?
Mr. Rogers, boy, I watched that all the time.
I almost never watched Mr. Rogers, a few times. Sesame. I didn't really watch Sesame Street either.
Yeah, I watched the shit out of Sesame Street.
I watched a lot of Gilligan's Island.
I watched a lot of Gilligan's
Beverly
Island.
Hillbillies.
I don't know those were quite children's programming, but I get like,
that's what I watched as a
when
child.
I was young. I watched Frasier. But I also watched I remember PBS as well. Like Barney was on when I was a kid. I didn't love that one as much, but like
Well, in the
Sesame
70s,
Street, Classroom
when
Contact
you
was one I
came
liked.
home from school or whatever, and if it was 1 or 2 o'clock, Gilligan's Island was on,
Yeah.
and then Beverly Hillbillies or Green Acres,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff
Place
was
to
on.
be.
It's the life for me.
Yeah, and when I was in the late '60s, before I started going to school, the Beverly Hillbillies were on reruns, and Petticoat Junction, they were reruns. So
Petticoat Junction.
plus they were still airing new episodes, so you would watch their older episodes during the day in syndication, and then
the new ones at prime time.
And then the new ones at prime time.
Yeah.
So
I think sometimes Batman was on the Adam.
I did used to watch
Batman,
Batman. Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk about someone we've mentioned.
Ron?
Is it? Wait,
Is it Ron Blair?
it's Leroy Neiman.
It isn't. It's
Oh, okay.
Fred McFeely Rogers.
Oh, I love Mr. I know people who worked
Fred
for Mr.
Rogers.
Rogers.
Mr. Rogers is our
I
second.
know a guy
our
who worked for
second
Mr. Rogers,
nice
yes.
guy that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Good people.
Which, that's a guy that you would go, well, what is he
Like
in
in
today's
real life,
cynical age? What kind of serial killer
Almost
was he?
every story
Nope.
I have is who he was on camera is exactly who he was off camera,
Yep.
except probably even more so off camera.
Well, one
Wow.
of his technicians who went on to work with George Romero. Funny, Pittsburgh and
Well,
everything.
I mean, yeah.
When he says, I worked on the Mr. Rogers show, you're obviously going to ask how Mr. Rogers was. And he says, just like he was on television. He was a Methodist minister, nicest guy you'd ever meet. When everybody was like, no, he was a sniper because his picture was above my battalion's, blah, blah. My buddy Nick Tallow, he says, Mr. Rogers didn't know how to use a screwdriver, much less, an M16. No, that's total bullshit.
Mr. Rogers, Fred McFeely Rogers, was born March 20th, 1928, and passed away February 27th, 2003. He was a television personality, musician, puppeteer, writer, producer, and Presbyterian minister.
Presbyterian, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
What did I say, Episcopalian?
You said Methodist.
Methodist, okay.
Rogers was known for creating, hosting, and composing the theme music for the educational preschool television series Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which featured his kind-hearted, neighborly persona and nurturing connection to his audiences.
Soothing.
I loved
Again,
it. Yeah,
soothing.
I loved it.
Yeah, I did watch Mr.
The only
Rogers,
thing is,
Yeah.
I have never been a big fan of puppets. So the
I'm
puppet
not
section
nuts
of that
over 'em.
always kind of creeped me out a little bit.
Well, they're creepy looking puppets. Look at Madam. Madam is creepy looking. All the pointy nose,
The
freaky
the
kinda...
ones on Sesame Street I was cool with. The
Well, yeah,
ones
they're
on Mr. Rogers'
furry and
Neighborhood,
they're like dogs.
They didn't quite work. I didn't quite handle those guys.
No, they were like scary German wooden puppets.
Yeah.
They were horrifying.
Rogers was born in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, 40 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, to James and Nancy Rogers. He had one sister, Elaine. Early in life, he spent much of his free time with his maternal grandfather, Fred McFeely, who had an interest in music. He would often sing along as his mother played the piano, and he himself began playing at age 5.
Age 5?
He obtained a pilot's license while still in high school.
Oh, what? No, that shocks me.
He studied at Dartmouth for 2 years.
That does not surprise
before
me.
transferring to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida, another Bob Ross tie-in, where he earned a BA in music composition in 1951.
Really?
That's his degree.
Yeah.
So it wasn't
Nope.
any... Wow.
And, he composed all of the music for every episode.
Yeah.
Everything was his, and he over 200 different, compositions. And I even read one thing, that he composed several songs for children's operas.
Very
Children's
cool.
operas.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like
No
to see one
shit.
of those.
Yeah, I would too. Well, every time he was like, let's go to the crayon factory, and you'd hear that piano trill going on, and
he
it
had
was
a jazz
lovely.
musician that a friend that worked for him as well. I forget the name of the guy. Sorry, I don't recall what his name was, but yeah, a jazz musician that was a good friend of his that would play some of that stuff too.
Oh.
At Rollins College, he met Sarah Joanne Bird, an Oakland, Florida native. They married on June 9th, 1952. They had 2 sons, James and John. In 1963, Rogers graduated from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary and was ordained a minister in the United Presbyterian Church. Fred Rogers had a life-changing moment when and I saw so many stories about this, when he first saw television in his parents' home. The first time he turned it on, he saw people angrily throwing pies in each other's faces.
Oh, yeah.
He immediately vowed to use the medium for better than that.
Wow.
In an
He was
interview-
on a crusade against the Three Stooges.
In an interview with CNN, Rogers said, "I went into television because I hated it so. And I thought there was some way of using this fabulous instrument to nurture those who would watch and listen."
Wow.
And the thing is, again, there's a lot of stuff I didn't put in this book because I found so much information on Fred Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
The pace at which he spoke was calculated. He spoke at a number of words per minute that was best at what kids could understand and learn.
How
Makes
thoughtful.
sense.
So much. He rehearsed and practiced everything. There was nothing improvised on his TV show because he said it's going to be. They deserve the best. He thought kids could handle so much more than what adults thought they could handle. at the
Yeah, I
time.
agree.
And so he really wanted to make sure his show was perfect for them.
Yeah, he never talked down to
No.
kids.
No.
He applied for a job at NBC in New York City in 1951, and then worked on musical programs including Your Hit Parade, The Kate Smith Hour, and The Voice of Firestone. He also worked on Gabby Hayes' show for children. Ultimately, Rogers decided that commercial television's reliance on advertising and merchandising undermined its ability to educate or enrich young audiences, so he quit NBC.
Public television, that's where it's at, man.
In 1954, he began working at WQED, a Pittsburgh public television station, as a puppeteer on the local children's show, The Children's Corner.
You cannot argue that he worked for QED. That was a brainy, nerdy thing. QED means there's no argument against it. It's irrefutable proof. QED.
Quid?
You guys have never heard
Latin.
this?
No.
Oh, let me see what it stands for. Okay.
Moving on.
Jesus Christ, you unwashed swine.
For the next 7 years, he worked with host Josie Carey in unscripted live TV, developing many of the puppets, characters, and music used in his later work, such as King Friday the 13th and X the Owl.
Is it really Friday the 13th?
King Friday the 13th?
I knew it was King Friday. I
Absolutely.
didn't know it was King Friday the 13th.
Of course it is. Can't let it go. He also voice acted the speech of King Friday and Queen Sarah Saturday, named after his wife, Rulers of the Neighborhood, as well as X the Owl, Henrietta Pussycat, Daniel Striped Tiger, Lady Elaine Fairchild, and Larry Horse.
Larry Horse.
The show won a Sylvania Award for Best Children's Show and was briefly broadcast nationally on NBC. Rogers began wearing his famous sneakers.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
No.
He found them to be quieter than his work shoes when he moved about the set. So at the beginning of every episode, he would change into those shoes out of his dress shoes because they were quieter as he walked around and they weren't as disturbing.
I just thought it was for comfort because
Nope.
we were watching him go from his daily
Everything
life.
was
He
a-
puts on the sweater, he changes
Everything,
his shoes.
everything was intentional. He didn't
Wow.
like quick cuts. He wanted every transition to be slow so they wouldn't be jarring to children.
Well, let me stop you right there.
Okay.
QED is an initialism of the Latin phrase quod erat demonstrandum. It means what was to be demonstrated or what was to be shown. Some may also use a less direct translation instead. Thus, it has been demonstrated. So that is, it's abbreviated at the end of mathematical proofs or philosophical
Thus it is
argument.
demonstrated.
Saying this is infallible, you can't argue with it.
I wouldn't argue with
But
anything.
how did you use it?
The correct way. I said
television, yeah.
WQED, you can't argue with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a smarter joke than anybody
bad.
had a right to
Not
get.
bad. In 1963,
God damn it.
Rogers moved to Toronto.
I say one smart thing once a year, and it's done. Gone.
It's in the ether now. So.
Yeah.
You've proven it. You've proven that you said a smart thing.
Damn it.
Thus it
You
is
should
shown.
you should soak in and be exultant that you said something so smart that both Jared and I didn't know what you were doing.
I did have the two challenges to you guys.
It's true.
That was below the
Exalt,
belt. I'm sorry.
exalt, man.
It can't be argued that I said a smart thing.
I could argue.
No, nothing again.
I could argue it.
That was an ironic statement.
Rogers moved
Okay.
to Toronto, where he was
Yes.
contracted by the Canadian Broadcasting Company to develop his debut in front of the camera.
Damn right.
The 15-minute children's program, Mr. Rogers. All one word.
Just no
Rogers.
space in
Nope.
Mr. Rogers.
Which, although popular with children, ran for just 3 seasons.
What is this Mr. Rogers show?
Mr. Rogers.
Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Many of his
Mr.
famous
Rogers.
sets, Trolley, Eiffel Tower, the tree, and the castle, were created by the Canadian designers.
Rock me, Mr. Rogers.
There you go. In 1966, Rogers acquired the rights to his program from the CBC and moved the show to WQED in Pittsburgh, where he worked on the
QED.
Children's Corner.
Can't argue it.
Can't argue
Mr.
with that.
Rogers'
Chaka
Neighborhood
Khan. Chaka Khan.
began airing
By the edge.
in
By
the
1968
edge. By the edge, Jared.
and
By
ran
the
for
edge.
Let me rock you, let me rock you, Chaka Khan, let me
895
rock you, Chaka
episodes.
Khan,
By the
let me
edge.
feel for
By
you.
the
By
edge,
the edge.
Jared.
Sorry, I had to get all that out of my system. Please continue.
The last set of new episodes was taped in December 2000 and began airing in 2001. So it went from 1968
68.
to 2001.
That's a long run.
That's a hell of a run.
Did he get paid
I
for his
feel
program, or did they not pay him like they did Bob
895.
Ross?
I didn't see anything about him not getting paid.
They paid him
895 episodes.
$8.95.
I don't
and
know.
that's how much
I
he
don't know
made.
of any other
Every-
television personality who's done 879 episodes.
No, that's a lot.
Of their show.
We're on,
So that's
we're on
daily.
41 now, so.
And we like celebrate it
Yeah.
every time we
Every
make
two.
another episode. We're
We did
like,
it
we're at
again.
44. Whoa!
We're not there yet.
No.
Another 20
Well, I
years
know.
we'll
We're
be
close.
there.
Yeah.
We're close. We got 3 more before we go to 44,
Yeah.
right? And then we can take a year off and then bring season 3.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Each episode
You're
of
right,
Mr.
son
Rogers'
of a
Neighborhood
bitch.
began the same way. Mr. Rogers is seen coming home, singing his theme song, Won't You Be My Neighbor,
Coming home from where, though?
and changing into sneakers and a zippered
He's
cardigan
not going to
sweater.
answer. He's not going to answer my question that I've wanted to know since I was a child. Where is he coming from?
He's coming from
The Presbyterian Church, where he was a minister.
His cardigan sweater,
Yeah.
do you know the origin of the cardigan sweater?
no.
No.
He stated in an interview for METV that every one of his cardigans or sweaters was knitted by his mother.
What?
Every one of them.
Wasn't it the same sweater?
I think there's a rotation.
I
She
always
knitted
thought the same blue sweater
His
every
mother,
time.
I read the story that she knitted for someone in the family every month a sweater. So he got one new one a year from his mom.
Well, I know I've seen him in a red one, too.
Yeah.
I've seen him in
Yeah,
a red
red.
one and the light blue one. That's pretty much all I remember seeing him in is light
I only
blue and
remember
red.
the red one, but
No, yeah.
I feel like I've got a yellow one in my head as well. In a typical episode, Rogers might have an earnest
That's gonna have to be
conversation
looked up.
with his television audience, interact with live guests, take a field trip to such places as a bakery or a music store, or watch a short film.
Or a crayon factory.
Typical video subjects, we're almost there, Ron, included demonstrations on how mechanical objects work, such as bulldozers, or how things are manufactured, such as Crayons.
Donuts.
each episode
Biscuits.
included
Bubble
a
gum.
trip to
That was
Rogers'
one of 'em. Bubble
neighborhood
gum was
of
cool looking.
make-believe, featuring a trolley with its own chiming theme song, a castle, and the kingdom's citizens, including King Friday.
For as creepy as they were, I love that trolley.
The trolley's
that trolley
great.
made
The trolley
me so
I'm good with.
happy
The trolley
every
I'm good
time.
with.
And then he would go to the spooky land of puppets in this creepy forest around the trees. It was spooky altogether.
The subjects discussed in the neighborhood of make-believe often allowed further development of themes discussed in Mr. Rogers' real neighborhood.
that's my
Smudge?
cat wanting
That
out.
cat that's some volume that cat produced. Mr. Rogers often fed his aquarium fish during episodes. There you go, Smudge.
Just like we feed our cat.
I thought you were going to
episode.
say he fed his aquarium fish to the cat.
There
during
were a
every
lot
episode.
of adult themes that he would discuss with children.
Yeah.
He had a quote that said, "If it's mentionable, it's manageable." And so he would talk to kids about real life things like going to the dentist, getting a haircut, that you're not going to get sucked down the drain by the
That's a good thing to
were
teach
terrified
kids, though.
of.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were inspired. He talked about things like divorce too.
You're not going to get sucked down the drain. Daddy's going to come back someday. He's going to quit smoking and come back home.
Rogers was diagnosed with stomach cancer in December 2002.
Aw.
He underwent surgery on January 6, 2003, which was
bring the room
unsuccessful.
down.
Rogers died on the morning of February 27th, 2003, at his home with his wife by his side.
Well, he had a much longer run
Less
than Bob
than
Ross,
a month,
didn't
yeah,
he?
yeah. Less than a month before he would have turned 75.
Yeah, he was.
He is
He also started young. He also started younger.
Oh, by like 23 years, I think.
His death was such a significant event in Pittsburgh that most of the front page of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette published the next day, and an entire section of the paper devoted its coverage to him.
Right.
Yeah, I'd buy that, though.
The Reverend William P. Barker presided over a public memorial in Pittsburgh attended by more than 2,700 people at Heinz Hall. Speakers remembered Rogers' love of children, devotion to his religion, enthusiasm for music, and quirks. Words are hard to
His
say.
quirks.
Teresa Hines Carey said of Rogers, "He never condescended, just invited us into his conversation. He spoke to us as the people we were, not as the people others wished we were."
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Nice.
So now all I've got left is fun fact after story of Mr. Rogers.
Wait, you know what I
Let's do 'em.
have?
There are so many good stories.
I have a chart showing the colors that he wore
the
of
sweaters?
year by year and how he went through these color trends of it. First, he had one red sweater,
Yeah.
2 yellow, 1 blue, and 1 gray.
Yeah.
And then, like the next year, 2 yellows, 1 green, 4 blue, 3 gray. And that's essentially the kind. There was a maroon at one time.
Yeah.
He wore 2 or 3 of those.
Do you guys remember? Do you not remember? Do you know the website 538? Have you heard of it?
No,
Yeah.
I'm not
It's like a
familiar with it.
statistical website.
I go there. all the
They
time.
analyze a lot of
I
things
love
about
538.
politics and things of that nature.
Ooh,
They
I would
have
like
a
to
great.
look at that.
They have a great association with ESPN where they do
And
like
it's
sports statistics.
nothing more than raw numbers.
Well, I mean, there's some conclusions.
Well,
on draw.
they are very good at taking the raw numbers that other people do. What they do is they make it into a kind of a betting thing where a percentage, like Trump has had a 40% chance of winning the presidency from them, as opposed to other places that gave him like a 10% chance of
Well,
winning.
what I'm wondering
So
is because the two sides can't seem to get along because we don't get the news from the same place, the facts from the same place. If there's just a place that has
Well,
nothing more
thing about
than
data
numbers,
is you can use it to say what you want.
right, and you can manipulate it
Right.
in any way
So,
you
but,
need.
but the
you
reason I
need
mention it
to.
is I was looking at the 538 did an article on Bob Ross. And 91% of his episodes featured a tree.
Huh.
Or if his paintings featured a tree. And no, sorry, it was a little bit less than that. It was 80-something%. Sorry. But if he painted one tree,
Where you at, buddy?
like it was like 98% of the time he painted a second one because they wanted a friend. He would always say this.
Yeah, it
this-
means a friend. It's a lonely
Yeah, so-
tree.
All right, here's some fun facts and stories about Mr. Rogers.
Excellent.
Okay.
Most people have heard of Coco, the Stanford-educated gorilla
Oh, the sign language
who can
gorilla,
speak
yeah.
1,000 words in American Sign Language
Yeah.
and understand 2,000 words in English, which I'm convinced is more than some people could do.
I absolutely.
What most people don't know, however, is that Coco was an avid Mr. Rogers Neighborhood fan. She learned a lot of her stuff from the show.
Yeah,
They give her
really?
information.
damn.
As Esquire reported, when Fred Rogers took a trip out to meet Coco for his show, not only did she immediately wrap her arms around him and embrace him, and there's a great picture of that.
I've seen that. I've seen it recently in the
It's
last
a
few
great
weeks,
picture.
it seems.
She did what she'd always seen him do on screen. She took his shoes off.
I love it.
Yep. Mr. Rogers responded to every single piece of fan mail.
I'd buy
Really?
that. Yeah, I'd
He
buy
had the
that.
same routine every morning. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., pray for a few hours for all his friends and family,
few hours.
study, write, make calls, reach out to every single fan who took the time to write him, go for a morning swim, get on the scale, and then start the day.
Goodness.
How many fans was he having to write
I mean, he
back
would
to?
get dozens a day.
I'm sure he would get like schools, like classrooms. Would
And there
send
was no
something.
form letter. Every single one
Wow.
of them he wrote. And there
wow.
are other you could find specific things he'd written, and it was very impressive.
So now we know what his job was that he's coming home
Yeah.
from.
It was writing letters back
Speaking
to
of,
people,
one
yeah.
thing I mentioned in his routine was getting on a scale.
Oh,
Every
weighing
day.
himself every day.
Mr. Rogers weighed in at exactly 143 pounds every day for the last 30 years of his life.
He maintained 143.
He didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't eat the flesh of any animal, and was extremely disciplined in his daily routine.
He was
That-
a total vegan.
That may be related to the fact that he grew up as a chubby child. And I read a story about him being bullied. And how he would cry when he was on his own all the time and said he wanted children to find that special invisible, I think I have that one later, that was inside themselves.
Yeah.
Wow. But anyway, he found beauty in the number 143. According to a piece written about him, Rogers came to see that number as a gift because, as he says, the number 143 means I love you. It takes 1 letter to say I, 4 letters to say love, and 3 letters to say you. 143.
What a guy.
Wow.
He saved public television and the VCR.
What have you seen him going in front of Congress?
Yeah.
And he gives the best speech.
Yep.
The most beautiful speech.
That's
And one of the
I don't have
congressmen
all the quotes
is
here.
like, well, you've changed my life today.
When the government
It was
wanted to
amazing.
cut public television funds in 1969,
Yeah.
the relatively unknown Mr. Rogers went to Washington. Almost straight out of a Capra film, his testimony on how TV had the potential to give kids hope and create more productive citizens was so simple but passionate that even the most gruff politicians were charmed.
Yeah.
While the budget should have been cut, the funding instead jumped from $9 million to $22 million.
Yeah.
Rogers also swayed the Supreme Court to allow VCRs to record television shows from home because that was a big battle.
Yeah,
Being able to
yeah.
record TV. It was a cantankerous debate at the time, but his argument was that recording a program like his allowed working parents to sit down with the children and watch shows as a family.
Yeah.
Wow. What a hell of a guy. Just giving his show away. Like
Yep.
the business end won't let you
Nope.
do that now.
He wanted
They
people to
destroyed
record
that in the
it so
80s.
they could have it and watch it as a family.
Wow.
Mr. Rogers seemed to have been almost exactly the same off-screen as he was on-screen.
That's what I've heard.
As an ordained Presbyterian minister and a man of tremendous faith, Mr. Rogers preached tolerance first. Whenever he was asked to castigate non-Christians or gays for their differing beliefs, he would instead face the person and say, with sincerity, God loves you just the way you are. Often
That's
this
beautiful.
provoked ire from fundamentalists, which is my
of
favorite
course,
part.
what a
That's
bunch
my
of
favorite
assholes.
part.
You don't tell me I have to love everybody. I'm a Christian.
This next story is one of my absolute favorites. Mr. Rogers was known as being one of the toughest interviews because he'd often befriend reporters, asking them tons of questions, taking pictures of them, compiling an album for them at the end of their time together, and calling them afterwards to check in on them and hear about their families.
So no real hit pieces for reporter. We're going to take Mr. Rogers down today.
Mr. Rogers is going down. Oh, damn,
Oh,
I
he-
like him too
Oh, wait,
much.
now
He
we're
just
best
sent
friends.
me a sweater.
Now he asked about how my
Aw.
wife is.
Right. No,
He wasn't
I can't do
concerned
this.
with himself and genuinely loved hearing the life stories of others. Amazingly, it wasn't just with reporters. Once, on a fancy trip to a PBS executive's house, he heard the limo driver was going to wait outside for 2 hours. So he instead insisted the driver come in and join them.
Yeah.
Oh.
On the way back, Rogers sat up front, and when he learned they were passing the driver's home on the way, he asked if they could stop in to meet his family.
Oh, my
really?
God. Yeah.
According to the driver, it was one of the best nights of his life. The
I'd
house
buy- yeah, I'd buy that.
supposedly lit up when Rogers arrived, and he played jazz piano and bantered with them late into the night. Further, like with the reporters, Rogers sent him notes and kept in touch with the driver for the rest of his life.
Holy
From one
wow.
night.
For the rest of his
one
life?
night of a limo ride.
A guy that
Wow.
serves him
Yeah.
is doing one job, and he
Yep.
does that.
Once,
Yeah.
while rushing to
No,
a New
that's
York...
the- That's the kind of stuff Nikki would tell me. Nikki's dad died in the 90s. And Mr. Rogers was like there. He was present. He would visit Nikki, ask him how he and his mom were doing, make sure they were okay. And this guy was just like a grip.
Yep.
That's all he did. He laid wire for Mr. Rogers. And Mr. Rogers treated every one of his crew that
Family,
way.
like family.
Like family, yeah.
Everyone
Would
matters.
take care of him.
I want to work for Mr. Rogers.
No shit.
Once, while rushing
More
to a
companies
New
need to
York
be run by
meeting,
Mr. Rogers
there were
and
no
Bob Ross
cabs
people.
available. So Rogers and one of his colleagues hopped into the subway. And I heard one report that said the subway was almost entirely filled with minorities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Esquire reported that the car was filled with people and that they assumed that Mr. Rogers wouldn't be noticed.
Yeah.
But when the crowd spotted him, they all simultaneously burst into song, chanting, "It's a beautiful day." The entire subway car was singing his theme song.
Very cool.
And that's a scary place to be, the New York subway.
Yeah, it's not that scary.
Well, back then, I'm sure. It's better now.
It's
fine.
you know, it's fine. It's scary if you've never been on it before.
Yeah, it
because
freaked me out
It's
the
a
first
huge
time.
thing, and there's
Yeah.
lots of
But
people.
everyone just wants to be left
But
alone.
in
That's
New
how
York,
it was for the most
Yeah,
part,
the thing
I
in New
found
York
out.
is, especially New Yorkers, they just want to. They don't care what you're doing. Just
Yeah,
leave
just
them
leave
alone.
them
Leave them
alone.
out of it. Leave them alone, and you'll be fine.
But have you
everyone
s-
ignores each other.
But have you seen the rats?
Or
They're
the
not on
in
the
the
subway
subway.
car.
Or the crab-
No,
that
they're
carry
in the down in
I
the.
thought they were what moved the subway.
They might be. They're big.
I've seen rats on
They're
the tracks.
big.
But
That's
they're
what I'm
not,
talking
they're
about.
not in the cars.
No, but they're huge on the tracks, right? You've seen that, right? Like the size of small cats.
I don't know.
Moving on.
I've seen
Simply not
one
true.
that
That
was
is simply not
big,
true.
like a little puppy.
Oscar-nominated actor, and maybe
like
he's
a
got
big
one.
puppy.
Michael Keaton.
Yes.
His first
Oh,
job
yeah.
was as a stagehand on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Nikki told me about him too.
He was, he appeared as Purple Panda.
It's Purple
Purple
Panda.
Panda.
He was a puppeteer. That's
Yeah.
what he was, picture, yeah. Additionally, Rogers gave George Romero his first job as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fred, and this is a quote from Romero. Fred was the first guy who trusted me enough to hire me to actually shoot film, Romero said. As a young man just out of college, Romero honed his filmmaking skills, making a series of short segments for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, creating a dozen or so titles such as How Light Bulbs Are Made and Mr. Rogers Gets a Tonsillectomy.
Yeah. If you've never seen Romero stuff before he did Night of the Living Dead, it's great.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's charming. It's cute. For being the '60s and all that. He did like a Cascade commercial or a Tide commercial or something like that, where it's like not cosmonauts, but like the what's the thing where they go inside the human body? That
Voyage,
movie.
Fantastic Voyage.
Fantastic Voyage.
Something like that.
It's something like that, except they're flying a ship into the washing machine.
Wow.
And that's how George Romero was going to sell
Yeah.
Tide or whatever he was selling was that right there.
The
That's
Zombie
so cool.
King, who passed away in 2017,
Bless his soul.
considered that Mr. Rogers Gets Tonsillectomy his first big production. Shot while working in a hospital.
Yeah.
I still joke that Mr. Rogers Getting a Tonsillectomy is the scariest film I've ever made. What I really mean is that I was scared shitless while I was trying to pull it off.
I bet he was.
All right.
Oh,
The
that's something.
final story I want to mention
All right.
is about Francois Clemens.
Okay.
For 25 years,
He was the pitcher
Clemens
for
paid
the
on-
Cardinals.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
I'm sure he was.
Clemens joined the cast of the show in 1968, becoming the first African American to have a recurring role in a kids' TV series.
Oh, I think I remember that guy.
There
I don't
were
remember much. I
a
remember
lot of
seeing-
innovations in terms of race relations that happened on the
Yeah.
show. Before a woman was ever the mayor, a black woman was ever the mayor of a town.
Yeah.
There was a ruler that was African American on the show with one of the puppets.
Yeah.
He had, before Sally Ride was in space, one of his female puppeteers went into space and discovered planets. Like, he was really innovative.
This is why the right wing is against public television, because Sesame Street also had minorities
Oh, yeah.
and tried to teach equality and caring for one
This is
another.
also why they're for homeschooling, where their kids won't be
Oh,
exposed to.
I'm not saying homeschooling's bad. I've known a lot of homeschooled kids, but I've also known a lot of pricks that were also homeschooled and just don't seem to get
I'm
it.
going to keep my homeschooling opinions to myself.
Yeah, as a teacher, you may want
Fred
to.
Rogers noticed Clemens when he heard him singing in church.
Huh.
This is a quote from Mr. Clemens. Fred came to me and said, I have this idea. You could be a police officer, recalls Clemens, speaking with his friend Carl Lindholm during a visit with StoryCorps. Clemens said he didn't much like the idea at first. I grew up in the ghetto. I did not have a positive opinion of police officers. Policemen were sicking police dogs and water hoses on people, he says. And I really had a hard time putting myself in that role. So I was not excited about being Officer Clemens at all. Still, Clemens came around to it eventually and agreed to take on the role. And in the decades he spent as part of the show, there's one scene in particular that Clemens remembers with great emotion. It was from an episode that aired in 1969 in which Rogers had been resting his feet in a plastic pool on a hot day. He invited me to come over and to rest my feet in the water with him, Clemens recalls. The icon, Fred Rogers, not only was showing my brown skin in the tub with his white skin as two friends, but as I was getting out of that tub, he was helping me dry my feet.
Oh,
In the late
very
60s.
Jesus-y.
Very
In the late 60s,
Christ-like.
Very Christ-like, yeah.
Clemens says the scene, which the two also revisited in their last episode together in 1993, so they recreated that scene in 1993,
Nice.
touched him in a way he hadn't expected. I think he was making a very strong statement. That was his way. I still was not convinced that Officer Clemens could have a positive influence in the neighborhood, and in the real-world neighborhood, but I think I was proven wrong, he says. Rogers, for his part, wasn't simply Clemens' iconic co-star, he was also Clemens' friend for life. He says he'll never forget the day Rogers wrapped up the program, as he always did, by hanging up his sweater and saying, "You make every day a special day just by being you, and I like you just the way you are." This time in particular, Rogers had been looking right at Clemens, and after they wrapped, Clemens walked over and asked him, "Fred, were you talking to me?" "Yes, I've been talking to you for years," Rogers said, as Clemens recalls, "but you heard me today."
Oh, wow. How deep.
It was like telling me
beautiful.
I'm okay as a human being, Clemens said. That was one of the most meaningful experiences I'd ever had.
Wow.
Wow.
God dang. I can't. I just can't with these guys.
I want to hang out with
I know
Bob
both
Ross
either
and
one of them.
Mr. Rogers. Can't they come over and podcast
I'll
with
say
us?
this.
Not so
I'll
much
say this.
anymore.
We kind of do with Emily. I mean,
Yeah, that's
Emily
true.
is
Emily's the closest
genuinely-
thing to a Mr. Rogers or Bob Ross
Yeah.
I've ever known.
And Jake as well for me. Like when
Yeah.
I see Jake,
Jake
he's
too.
no, he's
big old.
he is
He
he
pure
and I have a
good.
big old
Yeah.
hug. We hug every time.
Jake's
It's
a
just-
wonderful guy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So I wanted to bring this up because there's so much in our world that is so dark.
It's
But there
horrible.
are people who shine as those beacons of light.
I think we perpetuate a lot of that.
We do
darkness.
actually. I think,
No,
and
we expose it.
I might
We
be
expose
wrong.
it. That's true.
Shine light in the dark. I might be wrong. Is this the first time we've profiled people who weren't serial killers?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Either
Well,
serial killers
we
or victims
profiled-
of nature,
We
or
did Colonel Sanders the first
A
one.
little bit, yeah.
But
he was more in the history
dick.
of KFC. Yeah,
He
That's
was
true.
a Jack
He was a-
Rowling
I did,
dick.
yeah.
he was an asshole. He was up Ruby LaFoon's ass all the time.
Just mad 'cause you're not a colonel.
I know so many colonels, and none of them have come forward and said, Ron needs to be a colonel because
You don't need that kind of power.
I don't need that kind of power. You're right. You're right. I would wield it over everybody.
And the thing is, I want you to know it wasn't easy to find a history on Bob Ross. He was very, very private.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I found a lot about like his history, but not a lot of personal life or stories where people would talk to him.
Right.
But Mr. Rogers, like I mean, what I told you was probably about a third of the stuff I found online.
Well, because whenever he met somebody, he was a friend to him.
He left an impact on
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Every last person. No, my buddy Nicky, he has gone on and on about how good a guy
Yeah.
Fred Rogers was. And then you see that backed up in if you watch any video, especially the Senate video, which is amazing. I almost teared up during that because Mr. Rogers is so correct in the way that people should be.
Absolutely.
He was such a role model.
Especially for being as strongly religious as he was,
Yeah.
to still be so tolerant. You don't often find those together.
But
Well,
that's
that's what
because
impresses
he
me.
was living his theology.
Absolutely.
That's what it was.
As opposed to using his theology
to justify his life.
To justify his
Right,
life.
which I think most do now. I'm probably a dick for making that generalization, but it
No, it's
seems
fair.
like a lot of
As
them I
the
see.
quote unquote religious do the podcast. No, you're fine.
Right, yeah.
I give you permission.
I hear a lot of screaming online from these
Fundamentalists.
Christian people were fundamentalists, and it's ugly. That's not how.
And
you're
you tell
supposed
me
to
that
be.
you use the word Christian.
Yeah.
You take the word Christ in
Let's
what you
say-
are.
Let's not say the word use. Let's say they use the word flaunt.
Yeah. No,
That
yeah.
they're Christian.
And what I'm saying,
You know.
what I'm saying is they're using the word Christ in describing themselves, and that is so unchristlike.
Yeah,
Because they're Pharisees.
Yeah,
They all
absolutely.
behave as Pharisees.
Jesus condemned that kind of
Yeah.
thing strongly.
Absolutely.
When you say,
Calling
when
them
you
a brood
go
of
up and
vipers.
say,
Calling them a
look
brood
at,
of vipers.
look at how religious I am.
A
Look at
whitewashed
this.
coffin, looking
Yeah.
beautiful on the outside but dead on the
Yes,
inside.
that's what. It's so many of them.
So
and it's
let's just
ugly.
all
It's just
set
ugly.
ourselves resolutely to make this world a happier place.
Oh, I don't know that I can
A
do
good
that,
world,
Jared.
a decent world,
What's,
a world where no nation
He's
plots against
ripping.
nation.
What's
Where
happening?
no neighbor plots against
This is
neighbor.
the show.
A
But
world
that's
where there's
the
no
point.
persecution.
Come see the
or hunting
39
down-
steps
It's
and
over,
don't
it's
get a
over.
play out. Oh, it's
But-
over by Wednesday.
but-
yeah.
if we could all go into the world and act like Fred Rogers or Bob Ross, but
Yeah.
especially Fred Rogers,
Yeah.
think about how much better everybody
Without a
would
doubt.
feel, because
Yeah.
they touched the lives of not just the people watching them, but they touched the lives individually of the people around
met,
them.
yeah.
And the way that they touched their lives had to have made the way that those people then
Lived.
interacted with others
Totally different. Paying it
much.
forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had to pass on, even if they weren't as nice as Fred Rogers. I'm sure they were nicer because they knew
Yeah.
Fred Rogers.
Well, I think it's about selflessness. Both of those guys were selfless.
Well, you can
And
go,
they invited people in.
Yeah.
you can spread love or happiness where you go, or you can spread hate where you go, and the world will reflect what you bring to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And most people don't consciously choose what they're going to spread in the world because they're just living their lives and they're in the
Right, they're
moment.
just doing it, right.
Where you can see Fred Rogers consciously chose to be a nice person at all times.
Well-
I'm sure there were times when he had diarrhea like the rest of us. I'm sure there were times when he woke up thinking, oh, my head hurts.
I don't know that he ever had diarrhea.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
Can we substantiate this somehow?
I was a vegetarian for years, and I had diarrhea. So,
QED, sir.
It
QED.
was actually demonstrated during one of the podcasts when Jeff left to go to the restroom.
to go to the restroom. That's right.
so if we take nothing else from this episode, besides don't be a dick,
Right.
Yeah.
Spread something good.
Absolutely.
Spread
Everybody
something
has a
good to the
shitty
world.
day. It doesn't mean you have to be shitty
And I
to
think
people.
so many
Yeah.
people suffer from depression. I know I've battled
Yeah.
with
Oh,
that.
I battle hard
the
every day.
the guiltiest
Yeah.
sin of depression is the belief in your mind that you are alone.
Yeah.
That no one is going through what you're going through. No one understands you. But that's the message, Mr. Rogers, is you are. I'm listening. I understand.
Yeah.
And then listening to each other truly and talking. And you see so many kids in the hallway that walk past each other like, how's it going? And you don't wait for the answer. You just keep going.
Well, that's it.
Because it's a greeting. It's
but
not. You're not
making-
really.
That's
in it.
exactly
but making
it.
time for people and making them feel important and
Yeah.
special.
Have you ever? Someone said, "How are you doing?" And they're doing it as a greeting, and then you told them. Have you ever watched how uncomfortable they become?
Oh yeah, I do that at work sometimes because I don't want to talk to people, and they're like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm pretty rough today."
And see,
And then they don't want to hear that. They just want to hear, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Good. Bye."
yeah. In the
And
jobs
that's it.
I've
It's a
had,
greeting.
Yeah.
the real careers I've had were minister and teacher.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like part of my job is being that beacon of light.
Yeah.
That if I'm having a bad day, I'm not allowed to show it because my job is to let these students see me being encouraging and happy
Right.
and hopeful.
Yep.
So there are times I'm not feeling it. I've still got to try my best to, when someone asks me how I'm doing, I give pretty much the same response every time. I say I'm living the dream.
Yeah.
That's my response. And I want them to come to my classroom, and even if they're struggling, to see me goofing off and happy, and it to change that. The way they walked in, I don't want it to be the same way they walked out. And
Right.
I don't always succeed. I'm not Mr. Rogers.
Right. Yeah, but that's
I've
a good
fallen
way to
many
be.
times, but no, it's what I wanted to bring today. I wanted us to play nice today.
Well, that was great.
That was a great episode.
It really was.
Now, when we are this episode will air, it'll be after the
Yeah.
Annie auditions.
Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But
we
I-
don't know what'll happen. We don't know whose hearts Jeff is about to break
Crush
this
in his
week.
hands, yeah.
That's the worst thing about
It
auditions.
sucks.
I imagine
It
there's
really
going to be a
is.
lot of little girls' hearts
Well,
that are going to be
you-
crushed.
Yes.
Is this the first time you've auditioned, like solo auditioned for a show that you're directing that you didn't write?
Yeah. Because Heroicus, we
handpicked
chose everybody.
Right.
When we did Christopher and Steven, I was there out in Tacoma back in the 90s. I was there for part of the auditions. The director was there did the rest of the auditions and sent them to me videotape and stuff. So yeah.
So this is your first time.
It's not fun.
It's rough. It is.
We talked about
And
this on our
a
episode.
lot of times you worry about that everything you're doing is right so as not to inconvenience the other people.
Yeah.
Whereas as actors, we go, boy, I sure hope I'm not going to inconvenience the director, or I hope I do a good job. So it's this walking on eggshells by everybody, and then at the end of the whole thing, somebody's not going to get what they want,
Right.
and it's
Can't-
not
can't-
personal.
no.
Yeah.
It's not personal. Here's where I am right now. I know that some of my friends, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of my
A lot
friends
of your
auditioning
friends are
That's
coming
how
out.
it works
for
at the
me.
Playhouse, yeah.
And some of them are going to be disappointed either in the parts that they get or the parts that they don't
They
get.
don't get right.
And I'm saying right now, I'm sorry, but I'm not.
It's awful.
You have
The
to watch
one
it and
thing-
show you can.
That's
the
it.
one thing that I'm vowing to myself is that I am not choosing anyone because of their friendship.
That's what you
Yeah,
gotta
I'm
do.
picking
can't
for
do
the
that.
show.
Bart is very good about that.
Bart is
Oh, yeah.
very good at
Yeah.
that. And so if we can't be friends and do all this stuff together, then that's a problem because I have to go with the
if your
needs of the
friendship
show.
hinges
It
on
has to be
something
the
so
best show
slight,
possible.
then
Yeah.
it's not much of a friendship. Well,
that's the exact
as we
thing.
wrap up this episode of the Wildcard Podcast, we just want to thank you for being a part of it, for being our neighbors.
You sound so gentle right now.
I'm trying.
It's lovely. You're
putting
doing
it
a
on.
great
So,
job.
we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear about your time period which you love to live. Any inspiring good people that you know that you want
Right.
to talk about. And until next time, stay wild.
Stay wild.
And would you be our neighbor?
And bite the edge.
Speak.